Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
What's up guys, I'm Andy from 1A Auto. In this video, I'm going to be replacing this hub bearing on this 2013 Cadillac SRX. If you need this part or other parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1aauto.com. Right, we're going to remove this wheel. We'll take a 7/8 socket and a breaker bar. I'm going to crack these lug nuts free. You can also use a 22mm. Now I'm going to raise and support the vehicle. We're using a 2-post lift. If you're doing this at your house, you can use jack and jack stands. Now I'll take the lug nuts off. I like to use the socket because it's easier than just grabbing the lug nuts. Now I'm going to take the wheel off. Next we're going to remove this brake caliper. I'm going to leave the caliper on the bracket because to do the hub we're just going to take this off. I'm going to use a 18mm socket, take these 2 bolts out and a breaker bar. These are on pretty tight. Loosen these up. Take a 18mm socket and a ratchet. Once those are broken free, take these bolts out. Alright, now I'm gonna take those bolts out. Oops, this bottom one is still pretty tight. Just gonna support the caliper while I take this last bolt out. I'm gonna grab the caliper and bracket, just slide it back. Going to twist it side to side. That'll just compress the piston just a little bit so it's easier to pull it off. And when I pull this off, I'm going to use this brake caliper hanger, slide this through here, and then I'm going to hang this from the coil spring on top. We actually sell these hangers from 1aauto.com. So position that like that. That way there's no tension on the brake hose, so it's not going to break. Next I'm going to take this screw out. It's a T30. I'm just going to use that T30 socket and a ratchet. Take this one out. Take that screw out. Then we want to grab the rotor. If the rotor doesn't come off, you can take a hammer and just hammer in this areas right here. Oh, and it just popped off. Sometimes it's harder to get it off, but just keep hammering. And it's just a rust ridge that causes that to stay on there. Before I go any further, I want to spray some rust penetrant on the back sides of these bolts. There's bolts that go through the knuckle right here. So we want to spray those down because they're pretty rusty. We'll just use some rust penetrant on there, on those 3. Just going to spray a little rust penetrant on this axle nut. Make it easier to come off. Now we want to loosen up this axle nut and take it off. I'm going to use a 1 1/4 socket and a breaker bar. I also need a pry bar to prevent the hub from spinning. So I'm going to set this pry bar like this. Now we lowered the vehicle so that the pry bar can be up against the ground. Set it like this. The socket on there, loosen it up. So if the nut doesn't come off, you may need to use an air tool. So I'm just going to use a 1/2-inch air gun and loosen this up. Once that's loose with that, then you can use a breaker bar. And it's loose. All right, so once that's broken free, we can use a ratchet, take the nut the rest of the way off. All right, next we want to make sure this axle is loose from the hub. We'll just take a center punch and a hammer and just give it a tap and just make sure you see the axle move. We don't have to go any further than that. Just wanted to make sure it's loose. When we go to pull the hub off, we're just going to make sure that separates from the hub. Before we take the back hub bolts out, we're going to remove this wheel speed sensor so we don't break it. We're going to use a 10mm socket and a ratchet. Take this bolt out. You can grab the sensor and just slide it out and set it aside. Next, we're going to remove these 3 bolts that hold the hub to the knuckle. They're an 18mm socket we're going to use and a breaker bar. Loosen them up. Once they're all broken free with the breaker bar, then you can switch to a socket and a ratchet. Take that bolt out. GM recommends that you replace these bolts. They do have a thread locker on them. We're going to reuse them. We can put some more thread locker on when we replace the hub. Now this bolt, it's just going to sit in there. Just keep in mind when we go to put the hub back on, the new one, make sure the bolt is sitting in the right position, because the way the axle is, the bolt won't come out. Okay, now we're going to take this last bolt out, loosen it up with the breaker bar. Once it's loose, switch to the ratchet. And pull that bolt out. So if there wasn't any corrosion on this vehicle, this hub should come right off. Generally, you have to tap it a little bit with a hammer. We'll just take a hammer, just tap it from the side right here. You can see over here, if you move the backing shield, the backing plate, then there is a little bit of an air gap in there. So it is moving, so we just have to keep doing that. We can add a little more rust penetrant, and that'll help a little bit. Just let that soak for a little bit, and then we'll hammer it some more. I want to tap on that axle a little bit. Not too hard, because I don't want to mushroom the end of it, otherwise the nut won't go on. Pretty loose. And just slide it straight out, just like that. Here's our old hub. Here's our new hub from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the machine surfaces are the same. The bolt holes are in the same positions. The reluctor wheel on the back of the hub is the same for the ABS. Flip it over. It's got the same amount of studs. Everything's machined correct. It's the same height. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. Before we install the hub, I'm just going to take the backing shield, just wipe this off. There's not too much corrosion on this, so that's not too bad. Just check the back side. It looks good. There is a shim right here, so we're going to reinstall that when we go to put it together. But before I do that, I'm just going to take a wire brush, just clean this area so the new hub goes on a little easier. So if you're going to replace these bolts, you can pull this bolt out at this time. And we're just going to clean ours up, and we're just going to put a little bit of thread locker on there. We'll reuse it. Just put a little bit on the threads. And then I'm going to position this bolt back here before we install the new hub bearing. Just leave it like that. We want to install this spacer. Because this is just floating there, I'm going to use a little bit of grease. Just put some grease on here and then it will stick to the axle. Put a bunch of grease on there. And it'll stick right there in the proper position. Then it'll be easier to install the hub. Take a little wire brush, clean up the axle a little bit. There's a little bit of rust on there. Before I install it, I'll just take this backing plate, slide this in position, take the hub bearing, slide this on. And it's good. Let's take that bolt on top and get that started. Wiggle it around a little bit. Take these other bolts, put some more thread locker on these. And get these started. Once all those bolts are in, we can start to tighten them down with a socket and a ratchet. Might be easier to use a little extension when you put the when you're tightening the bolts with a ratchet. I'm going to use a torque wrench and I'm going to torque these bolts to 125 foot-pounds. We can install the speed sensor next. Just line that up in the hole. Take the bolt. Get that started. Snug that up. Next we can install this nut. Get that started by hand. Take the 1 1/4 socket and a ratchet. Start to tighten it down. And put that pry bar in place. All right, once the axle nut stops, then we're going to torque it with a torque wrench. Using the same axle nut and the pry bar, I'm going to torque this to 184 foot-pounds. All right, now we're going to install the rotor. You want to check the back side of the rotor if there's some rust on there. We're going to want to sand down that rust. You can just take a wire brush, just get some of this rust off. Okay. Then we're going to line this up. We're going to line up the hole with the threads. On this hub, there's one screw hole, so we want to line that up. And then we'll take the screw, get that started. We'll take the T30 socket. I'm just gonna put this in. You don't want this too tight, just snug. Take the ratchet. Just slight, very slight. Now we're gonna remove the brake caliper and bracket from the hanger. We're gonna slide, make sure the brake pads are spread apart. Slide the brake caliper over the rotor. Right, I'm just going to take these bolts and put a little bit of thread locker on them. Get this bottom one started. Get the top one started. I'll take a 18mm socket, extension, and a ratchet. Start to tighten these bolts up. I'm going to use a torque wrench and tighten these two bolts to 148 foot-pounds. Now we're going to reinstall the tire. Take the lug nuts. Get those all on. All right, at this point, I'm gonna lower the vehicle so that the wheel is just touching the ground. And I'm gonna tighten up the lug nuts with a torque wrench. I'm gonna tighten these to 140 foot-pounds in a star pattern or a cross pattern. The reason why you do it in a cross pattern is so you tighten up the wheel evenly. I'll go around again just to double check.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.